And then we heard Gunnar Johansson.
Number 12, we're roughly, a third of the way through the 32.
Yes, so this will be, I think, our 21st program, so this series will take well over 60 programs because I intend to have many performances and, if necessary, take 2 weeks on the Hammerklavier alone, and 111 and 101 and 19 and 10, those 5 last sonatas, which are probably among the greatest music ever composed for any instrument.
You mentioned on the last program that this sonata is more or less the beginning of Beethoven's, middle period, I suppose, for the sonatas. I'm just wondering maybe this is a foolish question, but what were the personal changes Beethoven was undergoing at this time that made this period different in terms of his development?
This sonata composed in 1801, so this would make Beethoven 31 years old. Now, the deafness had been setting in since 1798. The first period, and no composer is more perfectly broken up into periods, although there can't be any absolute definition. Periods are a dangerous thing in critical assessments. But Beethoven's life is so complicated, and his development so transcendental, really. The first period would be Beethoven, the young composer, feeling his oats, understanding that here is a definite power he has. And he was starting to become very aware of it, quite exhilarated over the idea that he could not only have a very good life socially and as a virtuoso, but he was also thrilled with the fact that his powers were ripening in every work.
In other words, he was aware, really, of his place, very much the way Liszt was later.
It's not a place. He was.
I'm talking about in
case,
time or history.
It was an internal thing. All he knew was that the sonata was his main occupation, and that his 2 great predecessors were Haydn and Mozart. He revered composers like Cherubini. He knew very well that he was living in a new time, and the spirit of the time proclaimed a definite freedom. Beethoven was highly Republican in his ideas, although he had to court princes for patronage. But this first 31 years or so, he's developing his art. And as you have seen, he has composed one masterpiece after another in the sonata form. Now, the deafness he's not yet totally believing it can't be cured. By about 1823, there's no doubt that this is going to get worse, and it does. And the middle period works after he has learned his form. Do you remember in Opus 22 he was so excited, this sonata is so well washed, this is really an apple pie piece. He asked the publishers a good deal of money for it. He was proud. It, in the sonatas, for me at least, signifies the end of the first period. Now in this Opus 26 you have a theme and variations. He's departing now into new experiments with the large form. And you have a funeral march in this also. It's not really a tragic work, nor is it a great work, but it's the beginning of a new and defiant approach. No longer is there regularity. He is not now a happy man. And how is he going to go through this horror? He's contemplating suicide, really. And as Ernest Newman said, the wonder is not that he contemplated suicide. The wonder was that he didn't do it. And he wrote some extraordinary documents at this time, which we shall read soon. No, the creative force now is becoming something so separate in him. He is very conscious of the deafness, does not want to discuss it with people. It is a secret. Now, during the middle period, this new stretch of time till around 1812, it's a time of, as Sullivan in his book calls it, the hero morality. Mm-hmm. Beethoven and the conquest. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, fate. I will seize fate by the throat, he writes. He is now becoming the man in our mind's eye, which is the conqueror. Mm-hmm. The Napoleon Symphony first, which would later become the Eroica. Beethoven is a conqueror at heart. His works very seldom end in a tragic mood, by the way. He, within his forms, he goes into the conflict and he is a victor. Very few works. The Appassionata is a tragic ending. Very few of his 200 works are tragic in ending. No, he's a conqueror. This period is an exciting adventure for mankind in looking at Beethoven, and there's no mistake that when the world thinks of Beethoven, it's not his later works. They're still a little enigmatic until we truly have many chances to hear them. It is the Appassionata and the Waldstein, the Seventh Symphony, and so forth. This keeps him going until 1812, the second period, from, let's say, roughly 1823 to 1812. And the majority of his works of this period are, as I said again, the hero. Mm-hmm. It couldn't get him through, obviously. For 1812 to 1817, we have Beethoven in a fallow period. Something happened. Defiance no longer could work. There had to be a new development in his isolation, and perhaps we can now call it these years of acceptance. Mm-hmm. But they were awful years, and they were tragic for his personal life. He had given up his desire to marry. The domestic part of him, the conflicts in this area were great. All of his earthly love was now put to his nephew Karl, a scoundrel of the highest order, or lowest. And it went into lawsuits and so many things, and we'll get into these aspects later. But nothing was happening, and his great works were at a standstill. He composed, but not his significant works.
When did he finally give up on his deafness, or was that a constant battle even
in the middle period? He proclaimed it to the world, as a matter of fact.
Oh, he did?
Absolutely. In fact, in the middle of one of the Rasimovsky quartets, he stops, he writes in the margin, "Nothing can now stop my creative powers. I will proclaim the deafness to the world," in whatever the words, I forget.
But he must have fought very hard to retain his ability to hear. I mean, he was a musician. It was only logical. Was he the victim of quacks? I mean, did he take advantage of every...
Well, he was constantly trying this or that, or oils, or going to the country so the noises, so he wouldn't have any vibrations coming into his ears compared to the city, things like that. But by 1812, he knew it was hopeless.
I see, but he never did anything really outlandish trying to save his hearing.
No, and
because I can see him being a frantic man. I mean, that we're getting into Beethoven, the personality of Beethoven. He is an enigma, and yet he isn't. I mean, the things that he does and the things that he goes through, especially with his with Karl, seem the sort of everyday problems that families have. I mean, I don't find that unusual at all.
This is one of the reasons that Beethoven, that we relate so well to him. His music is so earthly, really. He has these root experiences that we all have, and through this genius, he is able to put it into forms. There's a reason that the world feels this reverence, this awe for Beethoven. But these horrible years from 1812 until the Hammerklavier stands as a monument separated from the third period, and now perhaps we can call it the defiance is gone. That can't last, you see. And then a certain acceptance, and here then is perhaps the greatest single body of music ever composed, those late works of Beethoven.
He was revolutionary in the artistic sense, and I'm wondering whether that extended to his politics. I know that
he was a revolutionary, yes.
Was he
yes,
really?
Yes.
But
made many dangerous comments, was once actually arrested, and then they found he was a harmless musician.
A harmless musician. He changed.
Remember, these were severely revolutionary times. Napoleon rampaging through Europe, right through his city. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, man's freedom, Rousseau, Voltaire, the Romantic movement spreading, and the Industrial Revolution itself was creating a new human being. In fact, the human being that we are today.
And yet he managed to maintain his relationship with the aristocracy and to live off of them in many ways.
Yes.
I find that sort of interesting. Usually revolutionaries are in one camp or the other. I mean, or they're not revolutionaries.
Well, he wasn't political in the sense of being active in any way, and he even his relationship, though, with the aristocracy is very important because it's now on an equal footing. He's not a servant any longer. Beethoven demands equal rights, so to speak, for his genius, and his independence was important to him, so he connived and did everything possible to make sure he got the best benefits he could from his princelings, and they were amazing men. Let's be definitely clear about them. They drew up a contract for life to give him an extraordinary amount of financial support, which would make Beethoven a man that never had to work in any way to make his bread and butter. He didn't teach, except because he wanted to when he did. Well, let's get to the second movement of the Opus 26, which is the Scherzo movement, Allegro molto. Very fast, much fast. Wilhelm Bachhaus. Good, solid, rugged performance by Bachhaus of the second movement to the 12th Piano Sonata. Opus 26, another performance coming up, and the pianist is Bruce Hungerford. Bruce Hungerford in the Scherzo movement of the Opus 26. And already the forces in his Scherzo movement are gathering, which would culminate in such incredible things as the Scherzo from the Ninth Symphony. The propulsion, the protein energy. Nothing like it in music had ever been heard, like this rhythmical sweep. Another performance, and it's Richter in live performance. Richter's performance of the Scherzo, Allegro molto. Now let's hear a performance of the third movement, the Funeral March for the Death of a Hero. One writer writes, "It's pompous and cold, telling of the external trappings of death. The trio imitates the roll of drums and the cannon salute, as if the composer were witnessing the funeral rites of some stranger in a public square." And very different is this funeral march from the internal personal experience of the funeral march from the Third Symphony, the Eroica. Okay, who is it? Schnabel in the funeral march. The rare personality of Arthur Schnabel coming through as always in this funeral march on the death of a hero from Beethoven's 12th Piano Sonata. Actually, my opinion of this movement is a low one in the works of Beethoven.
It's too serious?
Oh, no, it's just, it's put together the organic genius that we have heard in every single movement from the Opus 2 number 1 until now isn't appearing. It's made music. As a matter of fact, he composed it after he had heard a funeral march from a fashionable opera at that time. And yes, it's objective, but there's something lacking in it.
But what do you mean by made music?
He just put it together. You hear the tremolos here, and it's objective. It's not coming from the inside like the funeral march from the Eroica. It's a picture. It's a cheaper manifestation of the musical spirit.
Mm-hmm.
It's not inspired. It's tacked up. It's here comes the trio now. Here comes the horn calls. Here comes the tremolo and the bass.
Mm-hmm. You don't see it as perhaps being defective in the performance there?
No, I think the performance was not great, but we'll try now Maria Grinberg. Maria Grinberg was tricky there.
Yeah, no pause between
No
movements.
pause. Very interesting idea. Much better performance than Schnabel. Thought out, much more powerful and pungent. Well, we will return with the Allegro movement right after this message. Movement now, and the performance is...
This is Wilhelm Kempf.
The concluding movement to the Opus 26, Beethoven's 12th Sonata. And a very difficult closing it is. So you see that this is not a simple work to interpret. First movement, a theme with 5 variations. A scherzo. A funeral march. And then this Allegro movement, which just leaves us. It's not... in fact, I've never heard in performance a totally convincing performance of the work. I was interested in once reading a comment, I forget who it was, saying that this work is one of the only, if it is the only Beethoven sonata that would not suffer if you played movements in different orders as if it were a suite instead of a sonata.
Well, that's what I was thinking. It's totally... It seems like an inappropriate way to end a sonata. I got the feeling that I was left hanging almost.
Let's have another performance of this work. First let me read this little statement by Ernest Newman, because it says what I was trying to say earlier in the program about how we relate to Beethoven as almost more than a composer. Newman said, "It is the peculiarity of Beethoven's imagination that again and again he lifts us to a height from which we reevaluate not only all music, but all life, all emotion, and all thought." Here is Claudio Arrau in the Allegro movement from the A-flat Sonata, Opus 26. A very fine reading of the last movement of Opus 26. Clear, clean music. Another performance coming up, and the artist is
Daniel Barenboim.
Barenboim. I like that reading better than the Arau, and that was Daniel Barenboim. And now another performance, Artur Schnabel. Beethoven marked it allegro, and Schnabel played it presto. And I don't find that satisfactory. On our next program, 2 complete performances of Beethoven's Opus 26, the Sonata number 12. And thank you for listening.